Is she even a real lawyer? The words slice through the static of a late-night broadcast, dripping with that practiced sneer only Mark Levin can deliver. His studio laughter fills the air, rich, mocking, meant to humiliate. A pause. Then another chuckle, the kind that says, "I know I've landed the blow." For a moment it feels like the room belongs to him. But on the other side of that echo stands Jasmine Crockett. The camera finds her face, unflinching, unreadable, her jaw set with quiet defiance. No theatrics, no flinch, just that stillness, the kind that unnerves men who mistake volume for strength. They laughed at her degree, the narrator's voice murmurs, low and steady. They didn't expect she'd turn the laughter into silence. The screen flickers. Headlines burst across the frame like sparks. Levin mocks Crockett's law degree. Lawyered trends nationwide. Tweets flash by too fast to read, a cascade of outrage and admiration colliding in real time. Someone posts, "She's about to school him." Another replies, "Wait for it." Clips rewind and replay. Levin leaning forward behind his microphone, the self-assured smirk of a man convinced he's untouchable. Then Crockett, walking through marble halls, her briefcase in hand, a shadow of calm following her steps. The narration rises. He thought the spotlight was his. He didn't realize he just turned it on her. The music swells, subtle, tense, like a heartbeat waiting to quicken. We see the split screen. On one side, Levin's grin, on the other, Crockett's silence. Between them, America scrolls, comments, chooses sides. For some, it's just another viral clash in a country addicted to noise. But for others, the ones who have been dismissed, doubted, underestimated, it's personal. They know that look in her eyes. They've worn it. The narrator's tone darkens, pulling us in closer. This wasn't just about a degree. It was about who gets to claim expertise, who's allowed to speak without being laughed at. Levin's laughter fades into static. The frame freezes on Crockett's steady gaze. Then black screen, a single line appears. But before the silence came the storm. In America, authority doesn't just wear a suit, it wears history. The kind of history that decides who gets to speak and who's expected to stay silent. What unfolded between Mark Levin and Jasmine Crockett wasn't simply a clash of opinions. It was a collision between two Americas, one clinging to its microphone, the other quietly building its moment. Levin has long been the voice of the old guard, a master of outrage, sharp in tone, fluent in insult. He built his empire on volume, on conviction shouted through airwaves. To his audience, that sound is power, the certainty of someone who never questions his right to be heard. But power has a way of mistaking echo for truth. Crockett, on the other hand, represents a different kind of authority, one that doesn't rise from privilege but from proof. Her words don't need to be loud, they carry the weight of having been earned. She's not performing for the cameras, she's surviving them. And that's what unsettles men like Levin. He questioned her degree, the narrator says, voice narrowing to a blade. But what he really questioned was her right to belong in that room. The frame widens, the story no longer confined to one interview, one insult. It becomes a mirror. The same tone that once dismissed women, immigrants, people of color as emotional now mocks them as unqualified. It's the oldest trick in the book. Challenge their credentials, then question their composure. For decades, the performance of authority in America has looked and sounded the same, a certain cadence, a certain complexion, a certain confidence mistaken for competence. But the tide is shifting. Crockett stands as proof that intellect doesn't need a pedigree, it just needs persistence. As her name trends across social feeds, something deeper stirs beneath the noise. People who have spent their lives translating their worth to be accepted in rooms built against them feel the echo. The laughter Levin used as punctuation becomes fuel for her narrative. The sneer that was meant to shrink her instead stretches the spotlight wider. The narration steadies, firm but intimate. For every young woman told to calm down, for every immigrant told their success is a gift instead of an achievement, this moment wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett. It was about them. Clips of commentators play in quick cuts, some defending Levin, others applauding Crockett. The country splits into its familiar halves, each convinced it sees the truth. Yet beneath the argument, one thing becomes clear. Silence can be louder than shouting if it's backed by truth. And when she finally spoke, the voice continues, rising with quiet electricity. Every word felt like justice catching its breath. The camera pans slowly across a crowd watching the exchange on screens in living rooms, cafes, phones in trembling hands. Some nod, others smirk, but all are watching. That's how change begins, not in the noise, but in the moment people start listening. The scene softens. The chaos of comment sections fades into the hum of anticipation. The narrator lowers their tone, inviting the audience closer. To understand her silence-breaking clapback, we need to understand who she was before the cameras rolled. And with that, the story exhales, the storm still gathering just beyond the frame. The red light above the microphone glows like a warning. It's late afternoon in Levin's studio, the familiar hum of air conditioning blending with the anticipation of a live audience waiting to be fed their daily dose of outrage. Mark Levin adjusts his glasses, clears his throat, and leans toward the mic with the precision of a surgeon about to make an incision. His voice, deep and commanding, slices through the airwaves. For decades, that voice has been a rallying cry, the sound of defiance for those who believe America is slipping away. He is a man who knows his craft. Every pause, every bark, every burst of mockery is a weapon sharpened over years of radio dominance. He's not just talking, he's performing. His sentences roll out like punches, short, decisive, designed to corner opponents and entertain his faithful listeners. To them, he's not a host. He's a guardian of truth, the last line of defense against what he calls the madness of the left. The studio around him is a temple of certainty, shelves stacked with books about law and liberty, portraits of conservative icons staring down approvingly. His team moves quietly behind the glass, respectful of the ritual. They know the rhythm, the rise in tone before a punchline, the pause before a rhetorical blow lands. His fans expect it, the fireworks, the fury, the authority that comes from never admitting doubt. In that world, confidence isn't a choice, it's currency. Levin built an empire on it, a following that believes every rant is revelation, every sneer a sermon. On social media, his clips spread like sparks. Levin destroys liberal hypocrisy. Levin schools another clueless progressive. The formula never changes because it doesn't need to. Outrage is a renewable resource, and he knows how to mine it. So when he stumbled upon Jasmine Crockett's name, a freshman congresswoman, young, sharp, unapologetic, she was just another target. He saw the headlines, her fiery exchanges in hearings, the confidence that dared to meet power eye-to-eye. It was irresistible bait. That day, between segments about border security and woke politics, Levin leaned back in his chair, half smiling as her clip played on the monitor. Crockett was calm, deliberate, challenging a Republican colleague with surgical precision. When the clip ended, Levin laughed, not the kind of laugh that comes from humor, but from dismissal. "Who is she again?" he asked, half to himself, half to the audience. "Oh, that's right, the lawyer." The word dripped with mockery. He chuckled. "A lawyer from, where was it? Some little college down south. Well, that explains it." His co-hosts laughed. It was effortless, reflexive, the sound of men confident they're untouchable. "We've got a whole new generation of legal geniuses now," Levin continued, sarcasm thickening. "Maybe she missed the part in law school where you're supposed to make sense." The soundboard operator muted his mic for a moment, but the damage was already done. Clips like that don't stay contained. They escape. They circulate. And when they do, they collide with the very people they're meant to belittle. Within hours, the segment spread online. Conservative pages cheered. But outside that echo chamber, it ignited something else: anger, pride, disbelief. The mockery of her education wasn't just personal, it was generational. To dismiss a degree from a historically black university wasn't merely arrogance. It was a reminder of every room where intellect was doubted because it didn't come wrapped in Ivy League prestige. Levin didn't notice the shift immediately. In his studio, he basked in the familiar rhythm of applause and validation. His listeners flooded his feed with praise, "Tell it like it is." Finally, someone saying what we're all thinking, he smiled. He had done what he always did, provoked, poked, dominated. He thought it was just another night. But outside, the reaction was brewing. Commentators called him out for dog whistle elitism. Viewers clipped the segment next to Crockett's courtroom footage, her credentials scrolling on screen. Her supporters didn't shout back, they posted receipts. Law degree, bar certification, case victories, every fact stacked neatly against his laughter. For the first time, his swagger began to look smaller. The mockery that once made him magnetic now seemed mean-spirited, even lazy. But Levin couldn't see it. He doubled down, repeating the joke on his next broadcast, his voice rising with the comfort of habit. The laughter echoed again, thinner this time, less certain. Behind that glass, the producer glanced at the monitor where the clip's comment count climbed by the minute. "It's going viral," someone whispered. Levin smirked, thinking it was a victory. But arrogance has an echo, and this time it was louder than his microphone. The narrator's voice cuts in, calm, measured, prophetic. For years, he used contempt as currency, but the same confidence that built his name was about to write his downfall. The lights before the hearings, before the cameras ever found her face, Jasmine Crockett was a young woman standing in the dusty heat of Texarkana, Texas, a town where ambition often met walls built generations thick. Her childhood was modest, her dreams audacious. She wasn't born into influence. She built her strength in classrooms that smelled of chalk and determination. Where some children grew up believing power was inherited, Jasmine grew up believing it was earned through work, through grit, through refusing to be silent when silence was easier. As a teenager, she was the one who raised her hand when others looked away. When a teacher made an unfair comment, she didn't shrink, she asked why. When her community faced discrimination, she didn't complain, she organized. The fire that would one day hold a Congress room in awe began as a whisper, the quiet certainty that injustice, no matter how ordinary, was never acceptable. College wasn't a rite of passage, it was a revolution. She attended a historically black university, not because it was fashionable, but because it was home, a place that didn't just educate her, but armed her. Those classrooms were filled with first-generation dreamers, working students, young minds fueled not by entitlement but by necessity. Every lecture was survival training for a world eager to underestimate them. She studied law not for prestige, but for power, the kind that protects rather than punishes. Law school wasn't glamorous. Her books were second-hand, her nights long, her meals sometimes skipped. There were no safety nets, only deadlines. While others partied, she memorized case law under flickering dorm lights, her notes smeared with ink and exhaustion. She didn't have mentors who opened doors. She had to knock until the hinges gave way. And when she finally passed the bar, she didn't frame the certificate for admiration. She kept it as a reminder of the weight behind her victories. Her first courtroom wasn't grand. It was cramped, fluorescent, the air heavy with the fatigue of the forgotten. Her clients were people who couldn't afford to lose, yet couldn't afford anyone else to fight for them, tenants against landlords, workers against bureaucracy, mothers against systems that never listened. She learned that justice doesn't speak softly. It demands to be heard through action. Each win felt less like triumph and more like breath, one more person surviving another day. While others inherited microphones, the narrator says, steady and reverent, she earned her platform one case, one client, one courtroom at a time. There's a rhythm to her story, a heartbeat that never falters. She didn't rise by outshouting anyone. She rose by outlasting them. Where Levin's world was padded with certainty, hers was sharpened by struggle. His voice was built from outrage, hers from resilience. He sat cushioned in his studio chair, surrounded by applause. She carried a worn briefcase, its corners frayed from years of use, a symbol of miles walked, not words spoken. When she spoke in court, her tone was precise, deliberate, disarming. Judges leaned forward. Opposing counsel fidgeted. She didn't weaponize emotion. She wielded logic, tempered with empathy. And yet behind that composure was someone who had fought too many battles to count against poverty, against bias, against the quiet suffocation of being underestimated. Her decision to enter politics didn't come from ambition. It came from fatigue, the exhaustion of watching injustice repeat itself while those in power debated semantics. She defended the same kind of people lawmakers ignored, and she understood something simple but profound. Policy is just the law before it breaks a person's life. So she stepped forward not as a politician, but as a fighter who'd grown tired of patching wounds that never stopped bleeding. The campaign was a grind. She faced skepticism at every turn. Too young, too bold, too black. But she knew how to turn doubt into drive. Door to door, neighborhood to neighborhood, she built her base not through slogans but through sincerity. Her speeches weren't polished, they were personal. She didn't talk about politics, she talked about pain and how she planned to end it. That authenticity didn't just attract voters, it inspired them. When she won, it wasn't with fireworks but with quiet vindication. She walked into Congress the same way she walked into her first courtroom, shoulders straight, eyes forward, unshaken by the weight of the room. To her, every chamber was just another place where truth had to fight for air. And that's what made the mockery sting differently. Because for Crockett, every credential was more than paper, it was proof. Proof that brilliance doesn't require permission. Proof that resilience speaks fluently, even when the powerful pretend not to hear. So when Levin's laughter echoed across screens, she didn't flinch, because she'd faced louder rooms before. The clash didn't begin with a debate, it began with a clip. It started as another night on the Mark Levin show, the red on air, light glowing, the mic catching every deliberate breath. Mark leaned forward, voice dripping with sarcasm. The topic of the hour, progressive lawmakers pretending to be lawyers. Then came the line that would ignite the fire. Maybe she missed a few law classes, he sneered, chuckling as the studio producer laughed softly off mic. I mean, come on, some of these folks think a law degree is a diversity trophy, not an education. He didn't name Jasmine Crockett immediately, but everyone knew. The segment's thumbnail, her congressional photo, her name bold and underlined, made it obvious who his target was. Levin's tone was practiced, the kind that wrapped mockery in performance. He'd done it for years, provoke, entertain, dominate the conversation. His audience loved it. Clips of his burns always went viral. This time would be no different, or so he thought. Within hours, his words were everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, short clips with captions like Levin Destroys Crockett and Savage Take flooded timelines. His supporters amplified it, echoing the contempt. Hashtags trended, law degree lol and fake credentials. But the internet moves fast, faster than arrogance can prepare for. By the next morning, another clip began spreading. Same subject, different tone. Jasmine Crockett stood before a group of reporters, calm as a quiet storm. No theatrics, no shouting, just presence. You can mock my degree, she said, voice steady, eyes locked on the cameras, but you can't dismiss my record. It wasn't defensive. It was declarative, the kind of line that didn't need to rise in volume to rise in impact. Her delivery cut through the noise not by matching it, but by transcending it. The internet caught the contrast immediately. Side-by-side edits surfaced within hours. Levin's sneer against her poise, his laughter against her calm. One shouting, one speaking. One feeding applause, the other commanding silence. Comment sections split like fault lines. Levin's followers doubled down, mocking, meme-making, circling the wagons. Snowflake politics, they wrote, can't handle criticism. But Crockett's defenders hit back harder. They clipped her past court moments, her legislative speeches, her viral takedowns of hypocrisy. The narrative shifted from mockery to momentum. On social media, her supporters coined new hashtags: degree of truth, Crockett class, respect the record. Each post carried the same message. This wasn't about ego. It was about erasure, the way black women's credentials were questioned while mediocrity elsewhere was celebrated. Cable networks jumped in, replaying the exchange in split-screen segments. Analysts dissected tone, intention, context. One commentator summed it up best. Levin made noise, Crockett made a point. As the debate escalated, so did the stakes. The internet isn't just a stage, it's an amplifier. What began as one man's insult became a cultural flashpoint, a proxy war for bigger themes: race, credibility, respect. Even Levin's loyal listeners started to feel the shift. His laughter, once charming in its brazenness, began to sound brittle, strained. The confidence that had long been his armor was starting to look like a crack. Meanwhile, Crockett didn't retaliate with a rant. She let her silence do most of the work. For 3 days, she said nothing more. Each hour she stayed quiet, her dignity grew louder. News anchors replayed her one line, "You can mock my degree, but you can't dismiss my record," like a refrain. By midweek, the tension had reached a fever pitch. Online threads spun with anticipation. Would she respond again? Would Levin double down? Every platform buzzed with speculation. And then the announcement. A joint panel discussion on live television, both names on the billing, one mic between them. The digital world held its breath. But when the noise hit its peak, Jasmine stepped to the mic and the room went silent. The studio lights burned white, sterile, merciless. Cameras locked in. 2 chairs, 1 mic. No applause track, no filters, just the quiet hum of live broadcast nerves. Mark Levin sat with the posture of a man too familiar with his stage. His hand gripped the mic like a weapon. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett sat still, deliberate, composed. Her hands folded neatly, her expression unreadable. The world was watching, the feeds already ticking, the hashtags preloaded. Levin cleared his throat first, his tone soaked in the familiar mix of mockery and bravado. "Well, Congresswoman, I hear you've become quite the internet sensation. Must feel good, trending for your degree, huh?" A smirk, he leaned back, satisfied with the opening jab. Crockett didn't move. Her gaze held steady, eyes soft but unblinking. The silence stretched, long enough for discomfort to creep into the edges of the broadcast. A producer behind the glass shifted in his seat, his finger hovering over the cut button. Then finally she spoke, voice low, even deliberate. "My law degree doesn't define me." The sentence landed like a quiet drumbeat. Levin tilted his head, waiting for the rest, the apology, the deflection, the dance he expected. It didn't come. She leaned slightly forward. "My work does." Another pause, the kind that demanded breath before the next blow. "And my work," she said, each word sharpening, "scares men like you." It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It carried the clarity of conviction, unhurried, heavy, undeniable. Levin blinked. For the first time that night, his face faltered just enough to notice. A flicker of surprise. The studio's air changed, dense now, electric. Even through the glass, the crew felt it. A producer froze, hands still mid-motion. A cameraman swallowed audibly. Someone whispered, "Oh, damn." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was reverent. It was the sound of dominance shifting hands. Crockett didn't move, didn't smile. She just let the silence live, let the weight of her words do the work she'd spent a lifetime preparing for. Levin cleared his throat again, trying to recover. "Oh, come on, Congresswoman, let's not turn this into some gender." But she cut him off, still calm, still surgical. "You mock my education, but you've built a career yelling over facts. I don't need to raise my voice to prove mine." The camera zoomed in on Levin's face, the flush rising in his cheeks. His grin stiffened. Meanwhile, social feeds exploded in real time. Fire she did not come to play. "This is what intelligence sounds like when it's done being polite." Mark Levin just met his match, and she didn't even blink. Clips began looping before the segment even ended. TikTok feeds filled with subtitles and slow-motion zooms of her saying, "My work scares men like you." Twitter trended Crockett clapback within minutes. In the studio, Levin tried again to pivot, reaching for old tricks, sarcasm, humor, bluster. "Well, you certainly have a way with words, Congresswoman. Maybe you should have gone into talk radio instead of." But Crockett smiled small, almost kind. "I'd rather make laws than noise." That did it. The line didn't need explanation. The audience, both in the studio and online, felt the hit. Levin looked down, fumbling his pen, his rhythm shattered. The narrator's voice slid in, quiet but charged. He questioned her degree, but what he really questioned was her right to belong in that room. The screen cut to quick flashes, a montage in motion. Crockett in a courtroom years ago, defending a young man no one believed in. Crockett on the House floor, her tone steady as she dismantled another baseless attack. Levin, years earlier, laughing into a golden microphone, king of outrage radio. Now those same lips pursed in silence. Back to the studio, Crockett's words echoing in the still air. "My work scares men like you." A slow zoom on her face. No triumph, no smugness, just truth, finally spoken and heard. The narrator continues. In that moment, every woman who had been doubted, every student told they didn't belong, every professional who had to work twice as hard for half the respect, they saw themselves in her calm. They saw power that didn't need permission. Meanwhile, outside the studio walls, the internet roared. Hashtags collided and cascaded. Lawyered, respect the record, Crockett clapback. Memes, fan edits, articles, reaction videos. Even some of Levin's usual allies went quiet. The silence wasn't surrender, it was realization. One commentator tweeted. Levin tried to question her legitimacy. She reminded him why legitimacy doesn't come from laughter, it comes from legacy. Another wrote simply, "This was justice catching its breath." By midnight, news outlets were running segments titled "The Clapback Heard Across America." Her quote replayed in prime time, on morning shows, across reels and podcasts. But beyond the virality, something deeper took root, a conversation about what it meant to be credible in a country still struggling with whose intelligence gets believed. Back in the studio, Levin sat stiff, trying to wrap up the interview with grace. "Well," he muttered, forcing a smile, "you've certainly made your case." Crockett nodded once, her voice soft but firm. "I've been making it my whole life." And with that she stood. No grand gestures, no camera wave, just quiet exit, the kind of grace that only strength can afford. The narrator's voice lowers to a whisper, almost reflective. She didn't raise her volume, she raised the standard. As the studio lights dim, the final image freezes on her walking past the mic, her silhouette framed by the glare. Then fade to black. A beat of silence. And the words appear on screen. But what happened after that silence turned a moment into a movement. The moment the clip hit the internet, it spread like fire on dry grass. Within minutes, timelines lit up with disbelief, pride, and replay loops. The words, "My work scares men like you," echoed across 1,000 feeds. By morning, it wasn't just a soundbite, it was a statement. Hashtags multiplied like wildfire, Crockett clapback, respect the degree, lawyered. TikTok creators stitched the moment with slow-motion edits and heartbeat soundtracks. One viral post cut between Crockett's calm delivery and Levin's stunned silence, captioned simply, "This is what composure looks like." It hit 10 million views before sunrise. On X, opinion threads tangled into a cultural debate. One user wrote, "She didn't just answer him, she dismantled decades of bias in under a minute." Another posted a side-by-side comparison. Levin's law school headshot beside Crockett's courtroom photo, captioned, "Different roads, same law, different results." Cable news couldn't look away. On CNN, a political analyst called the exchange a masterclass in controlled rhetoric. On MSNBC, a host said, Crockett didn't just win an argument, she redefined what strength looks like in public discourse. Even Fox News replayed the moment, the host's forced neutrality only amplifying its power. By afternoon, late-night comedians were quoting her line. Talk shows debated whether this marked a new era of intellectual clapbacks. And in classrooms, law professors queued up the clip as an example of grace under fire. Meanwhile, Levin's camp scrambled. His fans flooded comment sections, spinning the narrative she played the victim. He was just joking. It's political theater. But their noise only amplified her clarity, because every insult sounded hollow next to her composure. Every attempt to minimize her only reminded people how often brilliance is dismissed when it comes wrapped in a black woman's voice. The narrator's voice deepens. They said it was about credentials, but it was never about a degree. It was about who gets to define what qualified looks like. The screen flashes with quick cuts. A young woman at her laptop whispering, "That's how you do it." A middle-aged lawyer sharing the clip captioning, "Reminded me why I started." A student in a dorm room typing, "Studying law never felt this empowering." This wasn't just viral fame. It was validation. A collective sigh of recognition from people long spoken over, now watching one of their own speak for them, not louder but truer. The narrator continues, steady and reflective. For years, outrage ruled the airwaves. The louder the shout, the higher the ratings. But that night, America leaned in not to hear who could yell the loudest but who could stand the tallest. Across social media, patterns began to shift. Commentators noticed fewer gotcha clips and more thoughtful breakdowns. People started quoting her line in captions, on mugs, on digital posters. Influencers stitched her quote into motivational videos. Soldiers returning home, graduates crossing stages, mothers speaking at rallies. The moment had escaped politics, it became personal. Levin, meanwhile, stayed mostly quiet. For once, the radio mic that never cooled seemed colder than ever. When he finally addressed it days later, his tone was defensive, almost restrained. "I was just asking questions," he said, but the internet didn't buy it. Someone clipped his statement next to Crockett's response and captioned it. One made noise, one made history. In community centers, college campuses, even churches, the conversation turned. People talked about representation bias, what smart really means. Crockett's calm defiance became shorthand for a different kind of power, one that didn't need rage to command respect. The narrator's tone swells, hopeful yet grounded. She reminded the country of something it had almost forgotten, that intellect doesn't shout, it stands. Even weeks later, her quote lingered on talk shows, podcasts, and trending reels. One commentator said it best. In an age of outrage, Jasmine Crockett made composure go viral. As the montage fades, we see her walking through the halls of Congress, not as a trending name but as a presence. Reporters call her name, cameras flash, but she keeps moving. Calm, purposeful, every step echoing that same energy from the night she turned mockery into silence. The narrator lowers to a whisper, the tempo slowing like a heartbeat. Sometimes the loudest revolutions begin in quiet rooms. One woman, one voice, one moment that refused to bow. Then the music softens, strings, distant, cinematic. The screen fades to black. But beyond the headlines, Crockett's silence-breaking words carried something even bigger, a lesson America needed to hear. In the days that followed, the noise began to fade, but the echo of Jasmine Crockett's words refused to die. It lingered in headlines, in hallways, in hearts, not because it was loud, but because it was true. The narrator's voice enters softly, carrying weight and warmth. Dignity doesn't shout, it stands its ground. That's what Crockett did. She stood her ground. Not with volume, not with venom, but with certainty, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to let anyone else define it. Across the country, People found themselves replaying that moment not for the drama, but for the reminder it carried. The reminder that composure isn't weakness. That silence, when filled with conviction, can silence entire rooms. Clips of her interview began surfacing beside historic moments. Shirley Chisholm speaking truth to power, Kamala Harris on the Senate floor, Barack Obama pausing mid-speech to let applause fade before delivering a line that changed a generation. Crockett's calm belonged in that lineage, leaders who didn't ask for permission to be heard. She later said in an interview, her tone still steady, "You can question my background, but not my backbone." The line hit like gospel. It wasn't defiance. It was declaration, the simple truth of someone who'd fought too long to explain herself to people who never planned to listen. And as her words spread, something subtle began to shift in the national conversation. Viewers who once scrolled for spectacle started craving substance again. People began to remember that intellect, empathy, and discipline were not weaknesses. They were the roots of real strength. The narrator continues, voice now more reflective than dramatic. In a world addicted to noise, sometimes the calmest voice wins the loudest victory. Footage rolls slow, cinematic. A young girl watching the clip on her phone, eyes wide with quiet admiration. A law student walking across a campus courtyard, replaying the soundbite before a big exam. A mother smiling softly, whispering, "That's how you carry yourself." For millions, Crockett's calm became a mirror, reflecting back the dignity they'd buried beneath exhaustion and cynicism. It wasn't just a comeback, it was an awakening. The narrator continues. She reminded us that power isn't proven in how hard you hit, it's in how deeply your truth lands. Because her victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been talked over, doubted, underestimated, or told they were too emotional, too young, too different to belong in the room. Crockett didn't reclaim her worth in that studio. She confirmed it. And in doing so, she offered a quiet roadmap for what leadership could look like again, grounded, graceful, unapologetically smart. By the time the week ended, she wasn't just trending. She was teaching a nation how to redefine strength not as domination but as composure, not as arrogance but as assurance. The camera pans out, the Capitol dome glinting in the afternoon light, her silhouette moving across the steps, head high. The narrator's voice rises one last time, carrying the moral home. She didn't meet mockery with anger. She met it with truth. And in doing so, she reminded America that dignity is still the most powerful argument of all. A long pause, then softly. And for millions watching, that silence became a spark, mocked her law degree. She answered with mastery, and the room was never the same. What started as another viral clash became something deeper, something undeniable. It wasn't just about a debate, or a headline, or a trending hashtag. It was about what kind of strength still matters in America, the kind that doesn't need to yell to be heard. The narrator's voice softens, wrapping the moment in reflection. In the end, arrogance fades, outrage burns out, but truth, steady, composed, unwavering, that's what endures. Clips of Crockett play one last time. Her calm stare, her poised reply, that faint smile after the mic drop moment. The music swells, slow, resolute, hopeful. She didn't just win an argument, the narrator continues. She reminded us that respect, intelligence, and dignity still have a place in public life. That silence can be strength. That clarity can be louder than chaos. The camera lingers on her smile, not triumphant, but knowing. The kind of expression that says the fight was never about fame. It was about respect. The narrator closes with a voice that feels both intimate and collective. If you believe calm strength will always outlast empty noise, share this story. Because the louder they mock, the stronger we rise. Fade out on the text. Dignity doesn't shout, it stands its ground. Soft music trails into silence. Then one final line appears on screen, white text against black. This isn't just a moment, it's a message.